The only one that I've seen where it's not as bad is still, and yet it's not great with just, but that that is still the only one where it's not as horrible.
So if you have the right targets and you're not converting, then you need to look at the you're seeking. But none of this matters if the sales organization is not.
Welcome back to another edition of Outbound Fluff No Sales. Today we're going to talk about what does good actually look like? What does it sound like? How do you know if you're on the right track? We're going to give you some hard numbers as far as if you're already doing this, you're in a great spot. I'm Ronen and Pessar. With me is Ryan Reiser. We're the Outbound Operators. If you enjoy this episode, hit subscribe so that you can be tuned in for the next one. We do one about every day. And without any further ado, let's dive into this one.
So if you're standing up an outbound program, then the North Star should be you've developed a system and a process that allows your sales organization to execute the following day in, day out, right? The job of the salesperson that you're paying a salary is to be having conversations with your market. If they're not in a scheduled interaction with your next best customer, then they should be able to go into whatever tool you've designed, ideally a CRM or a dial list connected CRM, click a couple buttons and be in their next best conversation. And there needs to be a muscle built in the organization that any white space, which they shouldn't have anyway, should be time blocked, but this is like missed meetings that get pushed out, or if they don't have meetings scheduled, it's their calling block, their prospecting block, that they go to this list and they're executing calls because that's the fastest path to a conversation, right? So
Ryan, if you're taking that a step further and you're trying to design the perfect day or the perfect life in the day for a sales rep, what you're saying is that the perfect day is going to include the ability that anytime a rep has a 30-minute block of open time, maybe they had a call that no showed and now they have the rest of the time, or an opening where they're not actively in a sales opportunity or follow-up. The next best thing is their next best conversation. So how do you get them into that conversation with the market? That's essentially, that's it. That's what you're saying. Like if you're a sales rep, the goal as a leader is to maximize your reps' ability and time. And if you're trying to do that, that means how much white space do they have? And when they do have it, can they be in a conversation, or are they just going to be twiddling their thumbs?
correct. And so that's what buckets is all about. By using buckets, you have a stage definition, a status, and a follow-up date, and maybe a list name that helps orchestrate these lists in such a way where you'll know exactly what the next best conversation is, ideally focusing your time and attention on the conversation that's closest to revenue next. Now, as you move up to prospecting, the North Star for outbound, when you get your time really dialed in, is that for every 50 dials a rep makes, they should be having 8 to 12 connects. 5 to 7 of those should be completions, and you should be getting 1 to 2 really strong activations off of that. Now, an activation is a meeting scheduled for those of you that don't understand what an activation is, but an activation is interest, intrigue, intent, information. So you're either getting a meeting or a really, really strong immediate follow-up that is putting something close to getting yourself towards pipeline. So for every 50 dials, 5 to 7, 8 to 12 connects, 5 to 7 completions, 1 to 2 strong activations. If you're in that range, then you are in a really good spot with your target plus your message in the channel, which is the phone. And then you're starting to solve for timing. But when we look at the math of markets, put the little infographic up here, right? 3% are buying now, 7% are open to it, 30% aren't thinking about it. Then the rest, the 30%, don't think they're interested, then 30% no, they're not interested. So there's this 40% of your addressable market that is likely movable at any given time, but there's only about 10% that's like really going to be directly impacted in terms of like future pipeline. That's the open and buying now. You can start to activate in that 30% window. And if you run all the numbers on the dial to connect rate on 8 to 12, the completion rate on the 5 to 7 on those connects, and the activation rate, you're sitting in that window where the percentage breakdown of your yeses, your nos, your not me's, not nows map against the way a market performs. And you're not wasting activities on a channel that is not likely reachable. 50 dials, 8 to 12 connects. If you're not there, it's because your reps are wasting 60, 70, 80, 90% of their time dialing on a list of people that are likely never going to answer the phone. And how do you solve for that? Well, you use TitanX. TitanX will give you the fast pass to it. If you don't, you go read Bucket's chapter 6 of Outbound Sales No Fluff, and it talks about the concept of the first time you call a list to run a validation process, you're weeding out bad data, you're focusing on data that's closer to a connect. And if you are calling through a list, you really shouldn't call more than 20 times maximum. Because you're going to get to 98% of people within 20 attempts. 10 times will get you 95% of that. So that's, if
You
you're
really want to
really, really
squeeze for
going,
that
if you really
last
want to squeeze for it.
3%. Yeah.
And then, 5 to 7, 8 attempts is probably the real sweet zone. If you have a big enough market,
Yeah.
if you're sitting in a very small addressable market, then of course you can hammer the shit out of it, but you got to make sure you're using the right contact data. There's a whole nother can of worms that pops up now with the
Yes.
rise of these data tools. We're seeing everyone's moving towards this
Well, there's
clay.
also, Ryan, there's one more thing here. So if you've gone through those steps and you're using TitanX, essentially the fast pass to identify who's reachable, you're not done yet, because if you're calling with a dialer that is going to show up often as spam, you've just wasted all of that TitanX spend on dials that are not going to get picked up. So it equally important in execution is making sure that you have a healthy caller ID that won't show up as spam, junk, whatever. This is why we like to use FrontSpin for the dialer, because FrontSpin does a phenomenal job doing a few core things. On the most basic high level, you buy multiple phone numbers, they'll rotate through them to prevent all the signals to the carriers that are likely to then flag that number spam. And then if something does get identified as spam, which they're monitoring for,
Not
they will
if, when.
Right. Well, they will remediate that problem and get that number reinstated, which is something that almost no other tool out there will do. So even if you're already rotating numbers, eventually they're all going to start to get flagged as spam anyway. You need a service that can go back to the carrier and go through the process for you, if you're not going to do it, to reinstate that phone number and get it cleaned up so that it doesn't continue to show up as spam. FrontSpin does that as well. It's a wonderful tool. We love using it with our clients. It integrates with Salesforce directly as well. So the rep can just click 3-4 times inside of FrontSpin with our setup, and they're going to be in that next best sales conversation during that white space that they have. And we're
And if
feeding it with TitanX score data. It's not just get your data from Zoom Info, Clay, Apollo, wherever, but we're not calling it yet. We're then sending it to TitanX to identify who's going to answer. Now we have a list of reachable prospects. Those go into FrontSpin. Now when the rep has 30 minutes, they can make good use of that time. They could be in 3-4 conversations, maybe more, during that window, actual conversations with the buyer. Talk about efficiency and being able to actually create an environment, a culture of selling, a culture of outbound selling, and using your time wisely. This is, I always joke around that Ryan's methodology is essentially like time management for outbound sellers. It helps you prioritize the next best activity ahead of other things that aren't as valuable. And so that's really what the engine looks like, and what it feels like is it's making good use of whatever time you have.
And since you're getting technical here, the most important thing at the end of every attempt is that you have clear call results or
Mm.
dispositions so that you can review and understand, was that connect a completion or an incompletion? Was that dial to bad data? And every time a record pops up in the system, reps should be reviewing that record to determine after that dial attempt if it's worth calling again or not. Call results are super important. That should feed a matrix for you to review to say what is my distribution of my connects, well, my dials, connects, completions, activations, which will give you that North Star metric. And you know you're dialed in when, again, you're getting 1 to 2 activations for every 50 dials. In a 90, 180-day window, once you've really started following the system, that means your dial 2 meetings scheduled with all of you that care about meetings is in this 25 to 50 dial range, which is about 10 times more efficient than what the market will publish as the
Mm-hmm.
average dial to meeting ratio. Connect and Sell used to tout that anywhere from 500 to 1,000 dials for a meeting was like really good. This is 1/10 of that activity. And that plays right into the fact that it's because 90% of those dial attempts in a system like Connect and Sell were wasted. So you could just remove all of those dials and get that 10x lever. But that's what good looks like. And if you're not dialed in there, then you either have 3 levers you can pull. You have a list problem. You need to be improving the quality of the contact information on that list if they are indeed the right people. So you're layering in premium enrichment to waterfall in new phone numbers from different providers to ensure that you have the best number to reach the right person. Again, I was about to mention this earlier. Steer clear from Clay. We're seeing Clay's enrichment is producing about 45% bad data. Bad data bucketed into 2 categories. One, right name, wrong person. So it's a mobile number for a person by the exact name, but they have never worked at the company you're intending to target. This is a big problem. Okay. It's about 2 times higher in Clay. I don't know why, but that's what we're seeing. It's almost impossible to eliminate from all databases, but Clay's waterfall enrichment, whatever they're prioritizing right now, is for this market understanding of quality connects or more connects rather. But most reps aren't really messaging properly to identify that this is the wrong person. They're just pitch slapping and getting hung up on and then moving on to the next record and not identifying this. This is why disposition science is important. The other part of that is role verification that is not occurring. These tools don't have immediate access to LinkedIn for updating profiles. LinkedIn is not 100% accurate because people will change jobs and not update their profile. So you're never going to get rid of 100% of these, but you should have a system that identifies, does it still look like they are active in a role if your target's on LinkedIn? Again, sounds like a lot of work. It is, but 40 to 45% of the connects that your reps are having right now when you're using a Clay waterfall is essentially just a wasted effort. It's bad data.
We're seeing this again with yet another client. Although, oh no, they're actually not. They're not even using Clay. They're using Ample Market. The only one that I've seen where it's not as bad is still Zoom Info, and yet it's not great with just Zoom Info. But that that is still the only one where it's not as horrible. And I think what's happening is you've got to understand all these companies rely on LinkedIn for accuracy, and LinkedIn is only going to be as accurate as a user updates their profile. I just saw oftentimes Ryan will get people introducing us to potential clients. He sends an email over to me, hey Ronen, like, can you meet with this guy and tell him what we do, see if it's fit. I go on LinkedIn, he's not even at the new company yet. He already has an email. I'm like, there's no way we would have ever identified this person if we tried to.
No,
as a prospect.
There's nothing perfect. Yeah, there's nothing perfect.
This person, here's the takeaway, is right now in that small top 10% of your buyer's pyramid of people who are interested, who are looking, open to it, maybe even actively looking for exactly what you do. So it's really important to understand, like, the best that you're going to get is going to still have bad data in it. But Ryan,
which is why that drop off from 8 to 12 connects, 5 to 7 completions. Your completion rate is going to be in the 60, 70% range, and get a lot of people asking, like, why is that the case? Well, you have to deal with bad data, and then you also just have to deal with busy people from the first connect, and you don't want to, overstep your boundaries on that. Once you've identified they picked up, they're going to pick up again, and you can get them in the follow-up. But 70% completion rate is like top notch, because you've got about 10 to 12% of the better databases that are still going to identify right name, wrong person. That chops off 10%. You probably got another 10 to 15% of people that are in this like changing jobs category, which is, and you think about.
Yeah, I talked to someone on Friday.
The job market.
Testing a new script, and the guy was like, I'm on my way out. I told him what we did. He was like, that's interesting. We have something, but you know what? I'm not even the best person for this because I'm going to be leaving the company soon.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay.
That's not bad. That's not bad data at the time, right? That's either a not me. Soon to be. It's soon to be, but that's either a not me right. or not interested because, well, he's on his way out.
Ryan, I want to ask you the question. If reps want to get towards that North Star, one meeting for every 50 dials that they're going to make, what do you think is the number one thing, like the highest leverage thing they can do to get closer to that North Star becoming a reality for them, if you had to pick one thing?
Someone in leadership needs to own the list strategy, and it's not buy a data tool. It's own the list strategy and ensure that the accounts are the accounts that you want to be talking to, and the people within the accounts are the right people. That's literally the largest lever you can pull to get as close as possible to that North Star at some point in the future, because your targets are right? The equation, it starts with target, message, channel, timing. The next lever right underneath that is your messaging. So if you have the right targets and you're not converting, then you need to look at the distribution of the outcomes you're seeking. And if you have a disproportionate amount of people that are saying not me or not interested outside of that buying window concept, it's not a not now, but a strong not interested, or it's not me, even though you think it's them, you probably have a messaging problem. But that lever, which most people over index on, we just had this exercise over the weekend. It's like you just got to get something to the floor and look at the distribution of outcomes
Hmm.
because you can always revisit those and follow up. The list is always the strategy. That's why I say over and over and over again, the list
Yeah.
is the strategy.
And now, if this doesn't get handled well, what do you think is the typical timeline that it'll take a company or the leadership within a company to realize that they have a problem when they're trying to pursue that 1 in 50 goal? Like one meeting for every 50 dials made. That sounds phenomenal, no matter what team you're running. How long do you think it's going to take the average company to realize something is really off here?
Well, the average company, if they're not using TitanX, which again, it's always a plug for this shit, but this is a fast pass. I mean, it's months because you don't have the compressed data set
Yeah,
that's giving you the signals fast enough. I mean, we have a client that just, we're
launch
working
today.
through some of this stuff. We had one launch today, but this is the one a couple weeks ago at the start of the year that we immediately identified from their data source that over half of the target companies, even though they were buying technographics, didn't even have the installed technology required to sell to. If it was an average person calling on that list, it would have taken probably 6 to 8 weeks to get to the same amount of information we got in the first week. And
I'll
that's
do you one
because
better.
of the number of conversations that compress in a short enough period of time to say, hey, we're not in that ratio because most of the data is bad in the
Yeah.
form of even this the wrong, like it's not a qualified account, we can't do anything about that anyway. And then they also had that same problem with right name wrong people no longer at the company. So when you compress those things, their completion rate's sitting at like 30%.
Yeah, and
So
if you take that another example, we just launched a client today. I thought you were going to go down this road. Day one of dialing, we've already collected enough early data in 1 day of dialing that shows they already have a huge list quality problem with a big chunk of the people that have been connected with. I think it was almost 50%. It was 40 to 50% are either right name, wrong person or no longer with the account or some kind of bad data.
it's
And
the same
one
problem we're seeing
day,
everywhere. Yeah.
1 day, that would have taken an equivalent of about 1 to 2 months for your typical team to discover that. That's the benefit of using TitanX as the fast pass to kind of help you get to that information way faster. And that's extremely valuable because you can correct your course much faster. By next week, I already know these guys are going to be on it. They're going to have at least the information to know what has to happen. And with our guidance along the way, as one of our clients, we're going to help them understand what has to happen next, as opposed to they keep going and going and you're losing time and you're losing opportunity costs, you're losing potential buyers, all the while you're letting this go on. I don't think people understand like how expensive it is to run outbound poorly. Like it's everything that you're doing with it, it just ends up becoming a huge amount of waste when it's not done well with a well identified list, using FastPass like TitanX to actually have lots of conversations and call people who are actually reachable, and then having a way to measure what's going on. And that's exactly what we're doing, right? That's the Outbound Engine. It's a great way to learn really quickly what's happening, get to conversations at like sometimes 12 to 20x clip compared to what you're doing beforehand. And it's all phone based, no email, no social. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. That is the most ideal outcome you can get, and that's how you'll get to your 1 in 50 ratio. Every 50 dials, about one meeting.
Yeah, I mean, the quality of the conversations as quickly as possible, and then building your follow-ups, because your follow-ups are going to help you get from, you know, 7-8% completion to scheduled rate to something like 12 to 15%. And that's where that massive lever comes into play, because now you're
Yeah.
solving for timing. And those are also the opportunities that you see that tend to go through the funnel faster when the time's right too. But none of this matters if the sales organization is not following up. So you can get to that ratio, you can fill the calendar, but sales has to do their job and continue to follow up.
Yeah, and let's leave it with that, Ryan. But that's a great final note is like at the end of the day, you can have the best list building, that's step one, the best sales development outbound engine, but then the third piece has to be strong too, and that's the sales follow-up or the follow-up from conversation to customer, conversation to disqualified. or some sort of conversation to future follow-up. You gotta have that final piece. I'm trying to think of like what a good analogy for that would be. It'd be as if I built the built the race car, I found a great driver for it, they're about to go, and it's like, lap one finishes and they just pull over and stop racing. Like, no, keep going. You just gotta keep going. That's all you gotta do. Everything else is working. Just go. Anyway, let's wrap it here. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Ryan and I will be back tomorrow with yet another episode. I think we're getting close to our 50th episode. If you don't know, we're already on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. So check it out there. And if you hated this, let us know too. We always love to get that kind of feedback. I'm Ronen and Pessar. With me is Ryan Reiser. We're the Outbound Operators.
Peace.